Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Monday, June 5th, 2017 City Council meeting. At this time, I will call the meeting to order, and we'll be led in prayer by Pastor Steve Anderson from Cornerstone Church.
Let's pray. Lord God, we thank you for summer weather, for the way that lifts our spirits and makes us ready for some relaxing time in the weeks and months ahead. Thank you for the community that you've placed us in. We thank you that you call us to serve the people that you place us with, so we're glad to be here tonight as representatives of people who've chosen us to serve them and serve you. Give us courage to serve well and wisely. We pray in Jesus' name, and all the people say, Amen.
Thank you, Pastor Steve. Appreciate it. All right, see ya. Shelley, you want to do roll call for us?
I can. Albertson?
Here.
Bueller?
Here.
Danforth?
Here.
Manti, absent. Riefenberger?
Here.
Roby?
Here.
Solom?
Here.
Thorson?
Here.
Tupper?
Here.
Vilhauer?
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shelley. At this time, I'll look for a motion and a second for approval of the consent agenda. Motion by
Second.
Randy, second by Bruce. Any questions, concerns, changes? Hearing none, I'll look for council action. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Number 2, approval of the agenda. I'll look for a motion and a second for approval of the
So
agenda.
moved.
Motion by Glenn, second by Bruce. Any questions, changes? Hearing none, I'll look for council action. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Number 3, first reading of ordinance number 1726, amending zoning district boundaries by Valley View addition to R1 Single Family Residential District, R2 Single Family Attached Residential District, and R3 Multifamily Residential District. Shane, if you want to tackle this one for us. This is a first reading, guys, so there's no action taken.
Correct. Thank you, Mayor. This will actually come to you as a second reading at the next council meeting, and at that time you'll take action on both annexation and zoning. So the zoning is a two-part ordinance. This is the first reading of the zoning. Looking at the drawing on my screen, the area in yellow is phase 1 of the Valley View addition. The Highland Estates addition is not the current name. That will be annexed into the city. And then this map here shows the correct name, Valley View First Edition, and all of the red is zoned R1, the light blue zoned R2, and the lighter blue is zoned R3. So if there's any questions, I could
Shane,
answer.
this will be vetted at the Planning Commission meeting prior to our next council meeting, will it not, or?
Correct. The preliminary plan will be. This is the annexation and zoning that brings it into the city so that the planning commission can, once that's all approved, then it all kind of comes together.
The little blue pieces, what are those specifically?
They are intended to be R2 multi-family homes attached.
Shane, is the planning commission, they have seen this already?
They have seen the annexation and zoning, yes.
Was there any discussion about those R3s being adjacent to R1 without any transition to R2 at all?
Yes, we did talk about that.
And what was the consensus there?
The
What were
consensus is this R3 is desirable because of its location relative to the water tower. And this R3 here is the buffer between 2nd Street north, or going north, and the rest of the R1. So they're going to be like duplexes.
They can do duplexes, but they have the
Yes.
option to put apartment
Correct.
building. What is their intent at this time for the bigger one, the bigger R3?
That would probably be a double apartment building size facility. I'm just speculating. I mean,
Because typically you want to see that transition.
correct.
Yeah. That concerns me a little bit. I will say that.
Right. It's proximity to the water tower that we felt that would be a better density than somebody's looking at the water tower out a single-family residence.
Have they considered traffic density as well if they did put apartment houses in that larger blue
Yes.
R3?
Yep.
Any issues with that? Any concerns by you?
No, not really. I mean, that's not a mass exodus or entrance into a facility like that. It should handle it just fine.
And that all still have to be approved through the planning commission before they were allowed to do it.
The preliminary plan does, yes.
Right, but once the zoning is set, they are,
We can always rezone. This is their desired zoning that they requested. We did discuss this through our design review team, and also it was discussed at the planning commission. And the recommendation coming to you is the zoning that's presented.
So we'll hear more about that after the planning commission will meet on this, next Thursday or something? And
This
then,
coming
at the
Thursday.
At the following city council meeting will be second reading of this, and
Correct.
we'll know a whole lot more.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Shane, would you just pass on the planning commission next time they go through this, that there's obviously some concerns from us, at least a few of us, on that there's really no transition between R3 and R1 there. Just pass that on and make sure they're looking at that, then I'll be curious to see what they say to it.
You betcha.
Shane, is that white parcel where the house is that not being rezoned, or?
That is not part of the purchased land. That's a separate piece of land that's for sale.
Okay.
Okay, well, thanks, Shane. I'm going to move on to number 4, first reading of ordinance number 17-22, amending sections 18.0101 and 21.6501 to exempt contractors, trailers, shipping trailers, and moving trailers from certain parking provisions. And Justin, if you want to take this for us.
Be happy to, Mayor. Thank you. You may recall, Council, that at the last meeting we dealt with this particular ordinance, and again, it's before you on a first reading, and for that I apologize. There was another parking provision that's being brought forth by Ken Buchholz that is specific to Lake Campesca. That ordinance draft will be before the Plan Commission here this coming Thursday. But it was in the process of reviewing that ordinance, proposed ordinance, that I came across another provision wherein on-street parking was regulated by the draft. And I figured that, well, if we have an ordinance vehicle outstanding that talks about, on-street parking regulations, the need to change 180101 to reflect on-street parking regulations, that it made sense to take that language and get it into the right ordinance, that being 180101. So now this is, as a substantive change between what would be the first and second reading, it is back before you as a first reading for your consideration. If you look at the request for City Council action memo, the additional provision is specified or is laid out in red font. This would add the unique provision of the revision to ordinance that's highlighted in sub 5 and what would be the new sub 5, that for residential areas adjacent to Lake Campesca or Lake Pelican, no motor vehicle or other vehicle shall be parked within 3 feet of the white fog line painted on the road, and no motor vehicle or other vehicle shall be parked on any sidewalk / recreational trail or any portion of the roadway designated as such. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any of your questions.
Justin, you may have already explained this in your explanation to us, but help me out here.
Sure.
The section 5 that's going to be added now, I saw that same language relative to the fog line in the proposed language for the lake property or lake property storage.
Yep.
I mean, so that's now being pulled out of that.
That's correct.
And being placed in a different section. Is that
That is
right?
correct. Yes, that provision is being struck. That should be in your agenda copy for this upcoming meeting of the Plan Commission, or that would be it should be reflected in the Plan Commission. documentation.
Any other questions for Justin? Thanks, Justin. We'll move on to number 5. First reading of ordinance number 17-28, amending section 17.0602 to expand the list of sump, pump, and groundwater discharge nuances. So if you will take care of that for us.
Certainly, Mayor. This ordinance concept came up from a concern raised by a citizen who had been, after that period of of rain that the community received, had brought up concerns about sump pump hoses discharging onto a newly created street surface here in the city of Watertown. His particular concern was that these sump hoses were being extended out some ways into the road such that the water was discharging from the hoses onto the asphalted portion of the surface of the road, essentially past the concrete curb and gutter. And his argument was that that would lead to a diminished lifespan of the road, that it would cause problems with the road breakup, because asphalt is less able to withstand water being deposited on it on a regular basis. His contention initially was that this was a violation of existing ordinance, and I had to provide a response contrary to that interpretation, that the way ordinance currently read was that there had to be a nuisance caused by the particular discharge, and that discharge nuisance is specified in section 170602. And essentially what had to happen in his case, being he was accusing, or he was saying that this would be damaging to the road, is that there actually had to have been damage shown to the road. There had to have been that sort of cause and effect established, and that wasn't established. So, nevertheless, in talking to some folks here internally, and in response to this concerned citizen, I brought before you today language that would appear to address this issue with the defining of a nuisance as depositing a water from the sump hose onto the asphalted surface of the public street. Now, obviously, looking at the request for council action memo I provided, there are some important considerations to make here, which include, the empirical evidence of sump hoses depositing water on the streets, causing breakups in asphalt roads. That, city staff was unable to empirically prove necessarily, but it stands to reason that water regularly placed on asphalt could potentially cause breakup. The other concern might be potential costs that are sustained by homeowners as a result of having to redirect that hose to deposit onto the concrete curb. So these were all thoughts that came up, again, as a result of a citizen inquiry, and so I've laid this ordinance draft before you with that in mind.
Just a comment, on the street I live in, the house I bought, we had this very issue. The stumps that were shooting straight out would erode the road, and they just redid our street here a year or so ago. I did put an elbow on mine. It's cheap, easy to do. It makes a big difference. So when I saw this potential thing come up and read through it, it's not a big deal, but it makes a lot of sense, because I've seen that the erosion take place.
Hey, Councilman, just to clarify, when you mentioned the elbow, is that essentially just is that a 90-degree PVC joint, basically?
Pipe,
or that? Yeah. Okay.
Okay, that makes sense, Don. Thanks. Number 6, first reading of ordinance number 1729, amends section 24.0513 to place in ordinance existing administrative requirements for easements. And again, Justin, this is yours.
Thank you, Mayor. This particular ordinance concept arose out of a design review team meeting. There were discussions between city staff on certain easements, how they were depicted on the platted documentation that we had before us, or the plans that were before us. And there was a conversation about easements being depicted, not being depicted, And one of the staff mentioned the utility easements, how we generally require that there be 5-foot easements on lot lines shared with other lots, not necessarily adjacent to a right-of-way. And in going through and looking at the ordinances, I couldn't necessarily find a specific reference to that. And bringing that out to the review team meeting, there was discussion about, well, this is generally a requirement asked of developers, and developers have responded in kind, and it has been included in our development plans. So be that as it may, this ordinance would take that administrative requirement and place it in ordinance so that it is, in our code as being a requirement. That's what the change to subpart 3 sub C would do. Then there's a clarification as to the how the width of the easement is measured, and then how it should be depicted, on official plans, because that was another concern of the design review team folks, that in a lot of instances these plans will depict in notation, in certification, in writing, if you will, that these easements are of a certain width. And while that's helpful, it isn't necessarily helpful to a relative novice to development documents. So instead, this ordinance places as a requirement that you actually visually depict where these easements are located on each lot in the development plan so that it is readily apparent to a novice when it comes to property documents. The fifth provision then is the other substantive item that's modified here. And this is, again, a clarification that administratively has always been has been recognized for quite some time, which is how do we treat certain individuals' upgrades, if you will, to their lots that they place within utility easements that have generally been tolerated at sufferance. That's the language used in here, at sufferance. It is not something that municipal utilities necessarily would condone, but at the same time, the municipal utilities recognizes that people have fences, people have gardens. At the same time, municipal utilities sometimes needs to get to the conduit buried in these utility easements. And so what this language does is codify what is the practice of municipal utilities and other utilities, which is you can have some of these otherwise obstructions in the easement, but if work needs to be done on the conduit, it'll need to be removed to get to that work if necessary, and the utilities are not responsible for putting it back to where it was.
Okay, any questions for Justin on this one?
What do we do in that case when they're not, the municipal utilities isn't responsible, but what do we do as a city to make sure that it is taken care of? To be put back in place by the contractor or whoever.
That would be the property owner's responsibility, Councilman. Yeah, and another important thing to clarify too is that these obstructions, called permitted or at sufferance, only apply to utility easements. Drainage easements cannot have any kind of fence or what have you in it.
All right, thanks, Justin. I'll move on. Number 7, first reading of ordinance number 17-30, amending portions of chapter 11.07 to declare tall grass a public nuisance and allow for a remedy. I think this is something that has been needed for a long time. So Justin, I'll let you take this and kind of explain what our process was in the past.
Absolutely, Mayor. To just sort of back up a bit, I know that there have been actions taken by the city with regard to providing notice to certain homeowners, certain properties with regard to the state of their lawn. And while we have this provision before you today to explicitly include certain standards on tall grass being specifically declared a nuisance in our ordinances, I want to clarify that we still have the authority today to be able to bring ordinance violations for lawns being too tall, being unkept, currently in ordinance. specifically Section 110722 of our ordinances. The relevant sentence there provides that this section shall include anything else of any kind, nature, description whatsoever, which is unsightly and not in keeping with cleanliness, neatness, and good taste in the particular neighborhood. That phrasing there in that section, declaring offensive matter on the premises as a violation of city ordinance, would allow us to enforce. The issue, as far as we see it, is clarity and the need for it. What is cleanliness, neatness, and good taste? From a constitutional perspective, all we need is for a reasonable person to look at a lawn and say that does not meet, the cleanliness, neatness, and good taste of a particular neighborhood standard, which, if a lawn's really bad, it meets that relatively easy. But it helps to have a more definite standard. That's what this ordinance is designed to do. Moreover, this ordinance piggybacks off of our existing framework for dealing with noxious vegetation, which is something that's defined by the state. We're talking the bad hombres, if you will, of weeds, your Canadian thistle and whatnot. We generally don't have a huge problem of that in the city. So instead, what we've done is we've attached, per these revisions to 110712, etc., the concern about grass, tall grass, specifically grass that is over 8 inches in height, that is 8 inches in height and over. With that being defined as noxious vegetation, now not only do we have in ordinance the notice provisions, the due process provisions, we also have the assessment means to be able to, after the fact, go in and assess the property for the cost of the city having to remedy what should be the property owner's responsibility. So ultimately, this is just taking what we have, solidifying it, clearly defining the 8-inch height as being a noxious, as being a nuisance, a public nuisance. And also, I would add that it clarifies in 110716 certain notice provisions that are important to have whenever there's any sort of assessment that could come as a result of failure to abate. So I can take any questions you might have.
Could you touch on the notice that we are giving people on this? In the past, you would publish it in the newspaper, you would give a notice. How does this change that for us?
Sure, that's a great question, Mayor. The notice provided in this provision is of 3 parts. The first being publication notice broadly to the entire community. So at the beginning of the growing season, at the beginning of the year, say in spring, I think the statement here, it's April 15th, by April 15th of each year, there would be a notice published by the city to put everybody on notice of this ordinance that, tall grass is over 8 inches. Then, if there are individual violators that the city, whether police or code enforcement, come across, they would receive an affixed notice on their property, be it a door hanger or some sort of sticky note letting them know that they're in violation, and to contact the city once they're in compliance, as well as providing them with the due process provisions in ordinance. If they then don't follow up and take care of this, that situation within a certain period of time, the city's final notice would be provided by mailing. And that would then provide the third form of notice, second form of personal notice. And based upon the way that similar provisions in ordinance have been treated throughout the United States, that would meet the due process requirements for grass cutting violation.
And Justin, we've had problems with this in the past where a lot of the properties are vacant and trying to find out some bank and then some other bank. And so I know Jim had that problem, and he had ones he couldn't go in and do anything because he couldn't actually make contact with who the supposed owner was. Do we have any remedy to that?
That's a difficult one, Councilman. It's a reflection of many things, national and state politically involved. But for our purposes, the best we can do is follow up with whomever is the owner of record. And if that's difficult to find, we'll go with the last owner of record that we can find generally, is my understanding. And it's up to them then, once we go through and provide them with due process, to be able to say, no, we no longer own this place. I mean, the assessment process, to my understanding, is a lien on the property. So one way or the other, if it gets to the assessment stage where it goes on the roll and it comes before you, and you as a body decide whether or not the property was properly assessed, then it becomes a lien on the property and stays with it. So one way or the other, if that property ever comes back and is sold, it will be dealt with.
But I think the issue was because they couldn't get a hold of anybody and they didn't get any answer, it just got drug out and
Yep.
drug out. So do we have a time frame? We send a letter to whoever, we don't get any response, that we're going to do something rather than just delay it?
No,
Because-
The protocol will be to try to find whomever the owner is. I mean, obviously, at a certain point, if we don't receive a response back, then that's, per general due process, I mean, that's a default, effectively, right? So, then the property would get assessed, and we'd await until that property would be transacted, and that assessment would continue on with that property. It would be something that would have to be satisfied.
So Justin, in that situation like that, let's say it was a property that was in foreclosure.
Mm-hmm.
We went through the whole process. We finally went in and mowed the lawn and put a lien on the property. And 3 months later, the grass is 12 inches tall. Do we have to go through that due process each and every time?
No, actually, the way that this reads is that you provide by mail to the landowner and occupant, by notice attached or affixed to the property, and then the general notice. And that is the extent of the notice requirement, because by that time, the understanding is that you as the landowner are put on notice. Yeah.
So what's the time frame from the time that we've determined it's 8 inches or greater to the time that we can step in and mow? There's some properties that I see right now it's ridiculous what is existing there, and it would certainly appear like we kind of have our hands tied right now. So what, with your proposed change, what is the time frame, assuming there is no due process involvement, right, where they want to challenge the action?
Mm-hmm.
What's the time frame from the time it's 8 inches to we get in there and we mow her down?
Sure. So the way ordinance currently reads in 1107-16 sub 1 is that once notice is provided, they have 5 days after the giving of such notice. Now, depending upon how Ken and code enforcement wants to handle this, that notice could be provided, that personal notice of affixing the notice to the property as well as sending it by mail, could be done almost simultaneously. And in which case, the service would be affected when you put the notice in the mailbox, when you affix it to the property. Once all of that notice is provided, there would be 5 days. There'd be 5 days to address the issue. And if it isn't addressed within those 5 days after all 3 forms of notice have been exhausted, then the city is allowed to abate.
And how does that differ from the way we do things today?
Today, what is required is a publication notice. And keep in mind, this is
On a case-by-case basis?
on a case-by-case basis. Yep. And keep in mind, this is for noxious vegetation and overhanging tree limbs. So what we do is we don't actually have the due process for the code violation for grass spelled out specifically in ordinance. We take what's provided here as due process for noxious weeds, to my understanding. And Ken can certainly clarify for me. And then we act accordingly. Just by borrowing that provision.
Justin, I know that noxious weeds would not include dandelions, but that seems to be about as much of a problem as any of it, that your next door neighbor doesn't ever do anything with the dandelions, and so they just run rampant. What can we do with that?
Well, this provision would read that if the dandelions reach 8 inches tall, that we can deal with it. I know, yeah. Yeah. So, that's kind of where it comes into play. I mean, there are obvious other weeds. I mean, dandelions are a concern. They're starting to die off a bit as we get further on into the season. There aren't quite as many, it appears. But obviously, it's still a valid concern. What I've seen from provisions throughout the country the International Property Management Code, that's where substantially a lot of this definition of what noxious vegetation means is taken from. There isn't any specific provision for dandelions. I did not see that in my survey. So it's not widespread. That's not to say it's not out there, but I can speak from personal experience. Dandelions were difficult for me to control, even with my broadleaf killer. So I guess the question would be, is it dandelions or is it the tallness of grass that's really a public nuisance? It's a fair point either way, and it's something that could be changed in here if the council feels so inclined.
Justin, who are we relying on to report this? Who's going to enforce this issue?
At this point, it's like any code enforcement violation, really, Councilman, and that would include members of the public, our code enforcement officer who's out driving around and, between here and their destination, they spot something that's quite obvious. I mean, generally speaking, the city responds to code enforcement violations by public complaint. We just don't have the manpower to be able to, go out and search these things out, so to speak.
And we do have on our website report of concern. So I know we've been getting those concerns in all the time. Hang on just one second. We will be moving down a little further for code enforcement tonight. So because right now as we speak we don't have anything, and I just wanted to touch base on that. One more thing that I'd like to add. When this goes through second reading, will you make that publication immediately then so that the public is aware of what's going to happen, so we avoid that individual publication?
I think that's a great idea, Mayor. I mean, I guess I would, obviously I think it behooves the council, just as a suggestion, to wait until the effective date of the ordinance, so 20 days after publication of the minutes of the second reading, should the council approve this ordinance.
Justin, if I can ask
can they make that ordinance as almost something that has to be done immediately?
Yeah.
So we could do that rather than have to wait the 20 days. We can put it in that it has to be effective immediately.
Yes,
we could do that.
That would require what's called an emergency clause.
Exactly. You could do that if you wanted to, but you could wait the 20 days. Doesn't make any difference.
Sure.
But I'd like to see that grass clipped.
Yeah, and to that end, if the council were to suggest that, that would, because it would be a change suggested at this meeting, not one that occurs between first and second reading, then, this wouldn't have to come up as a first reading again. So if that's the thought of the body, I can make that change.
Is the notification, is that due to the assessment part of it, or is it or does it pertain to our ability to contract somebody, whether it's our own selves or somebody else, to enter onto that property? What's the notification purpose?
I'm very glad you asked that question, Councilman, because it was one I didn't clarify. No, it is. It is because what the provision in 110716 sub 2, sub 1 and sub 2 that talks about the notices. Sub 1 refers to the three notices that are provided with the violation itself. Sub 2 then talks about the notice, that would be 110718, talks about the special assessment process. That receives its own notice provision. So you're actually providing two levels of due process. One for the violation, to allow the party to contend that they aren't in violation for whatever reason, to address it on their own before they come into violation. And then the second level is the city comes in, performs the work, and then they're placed on the assessment roll. And when the assessment roll comes before you, it's at a public hearing where they are given notice and the ability to be heard, whether or not they should be on the assessment roll.
So we can't go on to a property without the notification process?
Yes, in terms of summary abatement of a nuisance, even it's as marginal a property interest as the length of your grass. It is still the city going on and addressing or doing something to your property, in which case due process is required.
Justin, how do we arrive at 8 inches as being the magic number?
That's also a good question, Councilman. Initially, we'd seen a lot of 10, and then there was a recognition of what 10 actually looked like, and there was some discussion about bringing that down to 8 for that reason internally. But really, it was sort of a broad summary or a broad survey, if you will, of what everybody else is doing. I would say the consensus has it between 8 and 10, maybe more so 10, but
I would lean toward the 8 long before the 10. So, because by the time we get around to actually dealing with it, unless the first notice gets some action, but by that time they need more than a lawnmower anyway.
Justin, what if somebody's renting and an assessment wouldn't mean anything to them? We're going to go to the property owner, obviously, but what do we do there?
I mean, that's kind of the thought, Councilman, with the public notice as well as the mailed notice as well as the property notice. If one of those should put the property owner on notice as to the fact that there's this potential for a violation out there. If you have a landlord that's absentee, I mean, that's ultimately a risk that they take for not being, at least viewing their property on a semi-regular basis. But more importantly, if this is something that they ultimately get assessed on and it is there, say conveyed in a lease document that the lessee was to take care of the grass, then the fact that the assessment was levied on the homeowner would potentially allow that homeowner then to be able to obtain that money from, or that cost from the lessee.
Would this also be 5 working days? Is that addressed in there? Or?
No, it is not. It is specified only as 5 days, and this is according to existing ordinance.
Okay.
So
Okay, guys.
we could specify.
I think we're going to move on from this grass right now. If you have questions in between, I would not hesitate to give Justin a call and kind of run things through you. Okay? So we're going to move on to number 8. Michelle, you want to come on up here? Perfect. Consideration of resolution number 1714 authorizing election of an at-large commissioner of the Watertown Cottington County Regional Railroad Authority. And we'll have Justin handle this one, but I want everybody to see your smiling face, Michelle.
Thank you, Mayor. This matter was brought up at the last meeting of the Watertown Cottington County Regional Rail Authority, and many of you might not know that it in fact exists in the general public. What its purpose is essentially to manage and in theory at least operate the rail spur that exists down there near GLE's facilities there. And GLE has invested a great deal of funds and infrastructure down there on a rail loop. That loop connects to the main rail line via this spur that the Watertown Cottington County Regional Rail Authority owns. Now, it was in recognition of the fact that we have a 5-member board, and one of those members ostensibly was with GLE, or is the CEO of GLE. The CEO of GLE decided that he would resign, and that we would then fill that position, which is the at-large position, and the one position that is decided upon by both the Cottington County Commission and the City of Watertown for the purposes of making sure that we get rid of any sort of issues that might arise in the future with regard to conflicts and the like. So to that end, we received Mr. Sire's resignation, and this instead the Watertown Cottington County Regional Rail Authority suggested that, given the role that WDC, Watertown Development Company, plays in helping to act as staff for the Cottington County Regional Rail Authority, that Michelle Kakasik, who is our main contact with WDC, be considered for that all at-large spot. So that's what this resolution is.
So if she were, I had some great. What does this authority actually do? What is their purpose?
So their purpose, they're a statutory body. They are sort of the sovereign extension of the state for that particular rail. That rail is public rail. That small spur stretch is public rail. And so Cottington County and the city of Watertown entered into an agreement to create this authority a decade and a half ago. And since that time, there hasn't been much activity associated with this body because of the small amount of property that's involved, right? So what the body is supposed to do is to manage, maintain, and should there be any need to expand or to operate it as a going concern, to develop resources to that end, to develop, to hire staff, to do. We haven't done that. The authority actually has the ability, with the consent of the city council and the county commission, to levy taxes. That is a provision in state statute. It's never been done. I won't say that it won't ever be done ever in the future, but it seems very unlikely given the 1,000 or so yards of spur.
Okay, so what I'm going to do right now, Justin, is I'm going to look for a motion in a second for any further discussion.
So moved.
Motion by Randy, second by Mike. Is there any other questions for Justin on this?
I got a question for either Justin or you, Michelle. Is anybody else in the development company currently sitting on that board? No. Okay.
No. The membership of the board is Commissioner Myron Johnson, Waterman. I wanted to say Shane, but he's obviously sitting next to me. I apologize, Commissioner Charlie Waterman. That's my bad. And then Shelley is a member, and I am also a member.
Okay. Any other questions? Hearing none, I'll look for council action. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thanks, Michelle. Yeah.
Thanks.
The pat answer on that is.
Okay, number 9, resolution of intent to enter into a lease agreement with Ben, Austin, Preston, and Todd Fleming for hayland at the Watertown Regional Airport. At this time, I think, Justin, before we get too far into this, I'm going to go ahead and get a motion in a second, and then I'll let you go through it and we'll get our discussion. I have a motion by Bruce. Second by Glenn. Go ahead, Justin.
Thank you, Mayor. You may not have seen this particular type of animal before, and obviously we don't have the agreement before you today, and that's for a good reason. In looking at improving procedures and taking a very risk-averse, legally conservative stance when it comes to our procedures, this was one thing that came up in review. State law, specifically SDCL 9-12-5.2, provides for specific public hearing requirements, notice requirements with regard to certain lease agreements to private entities of city property. Those lease agreements that are greater than $500 and of a term of greater than 120 days fall into this category of requiring a public hearing. And generally in the past, the way that we've handled this is to provide a resolution of intent at the time of the approval or the authorization of the agreement. Basically, the resolution authorizing the agreement was one and the same with the resolution of intent. And that is how some cities handle it in the state of South Dakota. However, I did come across a few communities, Madison being one of them, whereby they separate these two resolutions such that the resolution of intent comes the meeting prior to the meeting where the public hearing is held on the lease, and the lease is formally reviewed, combed over by the council, and authorized or rejected at that time. So this resolution and the next resolution on the agenda tonight reflect this more conservative approach adopted by some communities in the state of South Dakota. Simply put, again, resolution of intent, laying out the fact that the council will consider at the next meeting, if it approves the resolution, the agreement, as well as setting out that, yes, there will be a public hearing. Again, that's something we've always adhered to, but here it's in a different, more formalized arrangement.
Yeah, I do like this, the way that this is handled with the resolution, and then the lease agreement comes forward.
Yeah.
I think it just makes a lot of sense. Any questions?
Just a question on process.
Sure, Councilman.
Do we bid these out? I know they're not a big dollar items. Do we bid them out, or we just have people that they just renew them every year?
Well, in the case of the Fleming lease for Hayland, the Flemings have been performing this, have been, to my understanding, have been the ones on this lease for quite some time. And the reason why the Flemings are, and you'd have to talk to Todd particularly on this one, I think, for some of the details, but from my understanding, there are additional FAA requirements regarding training for haying FAA regulated land, which they have gone through, and we aren't aware of any other folks in the area who have gone through similar training. So, and the terms that they provided for this particular lease, as you will see next meeting, are particularly generous. So, in terms of bargaining for the best price, I think it's fair to say we got it here. As for the next resolution, I suppose I can get to that when we get to it.
Yeah, we'll get on that in just a little bit. I don't think it's dollars on this, is it? Did we not work out for the sharing?
Yep.
If you guys remember, a couple of years ago, we did the same lease, and we switched it so that instead of getting $500 or something like that, we're sharecropping. So we get the hay, which then goes to our zoo. So it works out very well.
It's a combination of that, Mayor. As it stands right now, the agreement is a combination of the share as well as a dollar amount too.
Right. But it seems to work out well, and we've been trying to do that, sharing the bounty on all our properties, to the zoo, kind of help them out a little bit. So I do have a motion, a second on the floor. If there's no other questions, I'll look for council action. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Number 10, resolution of intent to enter into a lease agreement with One Vision to lease property at the Watertown Regional Airport as our fixed-based operator. This is an exciting thing that's coming to Watertown, and I am going to look for a motion and a second for further discussion. So I have a motion by Bruce.
Second.
Second by John. Justin, I'll let you go ahead on this.
Thank you, Mayor. This particular lease involves mostly ground, and specifically ground below certain buildings, as well as parking lot space. If you can envision, we're talking sort of the southeastern portion of the buildings, if you will, of the airport property, or the eastern portion. That's what we're talking about here. The agreement that you'll see next time will have a visual depiction of it. Will provide a breakdown of what the rates are for each piece of property. This particular lease is entered into, or is viewed to be entered into, with One Vision, and should the council approve the agreement, because One Vision is in negotiations with the current fixed-base operator, Airco, to purchase their assets. And there are a lot of non-real property assets that go into providing the services of an FBO. And so One Vision has decided to purchase, or is looking at purchasing, and is close to purchasing those assets, from what I understand, and are looking at entering into a longer-term lease with the city to then operate the real property associated with the FBO operation.
So I do have a motion and a second on the floor. I'll go through and look for council action in just 1 second, and then afterwards I'll give a little explanation of what's going on. So at this time I will ask for council action. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. I just want to touch base a little bit on One Vision so you all understand. This is a company out of Sioux City, Iowa, that currently has a fixed base operation there. They have agreements with Frontier Airlines, Delta Airlines, of course also with Aerodynamics that is flying in and out of Watertown. This company is bringing in, they'll probably have between 7 to 8 new mechanics on site that will strictly be working on large, I think they're called Airbus 320s, Learjets, things such as that will be flying in on a consistent basis. Their operation in Sioux City, Iowa is too busy right now. They don't have the space, and Watertown is exactly where they want to go. They look at our city, how we've been moving forward on everything. They love the idea of the new runway that's coming in. It's all going to be prepared for them. One of the reasons why we continually upgrade our airport is reasons for this. They are also talking charter airlines that will go through the winter time that I think will be exciting for us. They're also looking at a fueling station that will go out there that people can pull up with their Learjets or whatever equipment they're flying in and fuel it up on site, swipe their credit card, fill the tank, and go. So this is exciting for Watertown, and this is just, I think, kind of just the start of something very, very big for the airport out there.
Mayor,
Steve?
Sorry.
This has got to be good for LATI. I mean, they're going to tie into this somehow, aren't they?
They love this. They're excited for it. Actually, what's happening right now is ADI is, when they come up here and they have an issue, they fly these people in from Sioux City, Iowa already to fix the airplanes. They're also looking at, it'll be very, very shortly, they'll be coming to you and talking about more space that they need to build a hangar large enough to hold these aircraft that they're going to be working on. So they're looking at many thousands of square feet. That'll be exciting for us.
And to clarify, Mayor, and what Councilman Roby was referencing with regard to LATI, what a fixed
I'm
base...
sorry, I thought I heard you say ADI. LATI. Oh, yeah, LATI,
yeah,
absolutely.
It goes to what a fixed base operator is, and a number of folks maybe in the general public might not know, but really they're kind of a one-stop shop. I mean, they provide fueling services, tie-down services, aircraft rental, maintenance, engines, propellers, jet engines, what have you, flight instruction. So they do run the full gamut of services.
Yeah, and we've had Mike Cartney involved in the conversations, and they're very excited about bringing this in. They have certified instructor pilots at LATI, which these firms can use, and it's going to be very, very good. It's a real positive for Watertown. So we have a motion, a second. That's all been taken care of, right, on that particular one. I tend to ramble on that one. It's exciting for us. So number 11, consideration of a full-time code enforcement officer in the Building Service Department to replace the vacant part-time code enforcement officer position. We're going to have you come up, Kenny, but I think what I'm going to do is get a motion and a second for discussion, and then we'll talk about what your plans are. Motion by Randy, second by Dan, and Kenny, if you want to give us a little update on what's going on here.
Well, as you all know, we lost our our current code enforcement officer. He was a part-time employee for us. He worked 19 hours a week. He was in there roughly at $12.75 an hour. I think you pretty much all agree that we could probably use a full-time person in that position. So we've put together a proposal to add one in there, and sorry, you know, but without Jim being around here for a little bit, we kind of got behind a little bit on the grass ball and stuff. I think we got it back together now, and we went out and made a lot of contacts with a lot of people, and a lot of them have followed up just on the first card notice, which is good, but then we still got those ones that you got to go out and find the people. So getting a full-time person in there to follow up on that and create the database to know where that stuff's at in a quick hurry will be a good thing. We've made a presentation to bring him in at a grade 4, step 1, and I guess any other questions you have for me would be great.
Ken, I've had a little conversation with you about grade 4. Is that a high enough grade for this position? Meaning, those are not easy jobs, you know. And I don't know exactly. I'm not sure what grade 4 is, but I have an idea, and it seems like this might be qualified for a higher grade level than grade 4. And I don't mean to telling you guys what to do, but it seems like with Aberdeen having 4 of these people, and we're moving up to 1. I think it's a really hard job. I remember asking Jim Christensen on several occasions on things that
you got to be kind of a special person with thick skin. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah. So I don't know if I'm recommending grade 5 or not. But it seems like what I've heard of what grade 4 is, that it might qualify for higher grade than what that would be.
Let me just before we get too crazy here, there is a process that we do go through. Every new job description gets graded using 12 or 13 different criteria, and it's the same for every job description based on the level of experience, schooling, that type of thing. And we did go through that grading process, and it did grade out at a grade 4, which is where the budget is sitting. So, I mean, we didn't just kind of come up with it or look at other similar jobs. I mean, we did go through that same grading process that we do for every job within the city, and it came out at that grade 4 level. So it gets hard to justify to put it up just because we try to keep that equitable within all the other jobs in the city in that same grading. So I guess that's why it's sitting where it's sitting. And if there's extreme difficulty in finding a person, or we don't get any job offers, I think at that point we could maybe have a conversation. But I guess I don't know how to get a higher grade with the job description as it sits right now, what we're planning on putting out to the public.
Shelley, how much difference will this make overall as far as compensation benefits from where we are right now?
I did do that calculation from what was estimated based on the grade 4, and then we also always aim high at the health insurance. We always estimate that somebody's going to take family coverage. If they would do that based on what was budgeted, what had been used previously, we're about $43,200 short between the part-time and full-time. So that will have to be supplemented at the end of the year, either through contingency or through just the general fund, unallocated fund balance.
So what would the if you annualized it now, what would this position run for total pay and benefits?
Pay, and then with the family coverage, which is something we always estimate, it's $53,500. The base wage is $38,148, which is the grade 4 step 1, and then you add all of the benefits in there, and you get to the $53,500.
Just out of curiosity, what's the normal patrol officer start? What grade?
5.
5.
Kenny, could you explain what codes this person would be responsible for enforcement?
Well, it's basically any code within the book, but in general, we do snow removal, grass removal, garbage, junk. Even though we report on and pass cars over to the police department when that comes about. But typically, it's almost anything that anybody's going to come up with. The overhanging tree process or squatters on land or whatever the case may be. I mean, it goes through their office first, and they'll vent it out to wherever it goes if they can't take care of it themselves. So.
But it's more ordinance related, right? And not.
Yes, it's ordinance related.
Not law related.
No, that's generally why, like, abandoned cars, even though it would come to us first and we'd vent it through our office, but that would get passed on to the police department because they're the only one that can actually write a citation. We can't. Even if something comes up like a wood pile or a scrap pile or rodents or something like that, we'd still vet it through our office first, but it would have to go to the police department to actually have an actual ticket wrote on it. So,
would this person be responsible for building codes as well, or enforcement of that kind?
Only in the supplemental area type thing, and the backup to the other duties within the thing. But in general, he would not be doing building inspections or anything like that. I mean, we kind of cross-train within our department so we can all kind of fill up if somebody's gone sick or whatever the case may be, or vacation, somewhat, in everybody's duty. But other than that, no, it wouldn't be a primary responsibility.
Thank you. Thank you, Ken.
But the sign code would also be his responsibility.
Or her.
His or her.
Or her. I will say this. I think that this has been, it's probably way past due. It's the one thing that we periodically hear from people, and that's is the frustration that comes with non-enforcement. And so I think we need to take a look at where we're going to get those funds, and I think we need to search out this individual, and I would suggest that we do go with the full-time position.
I would say that, Jim did an excellent job for the hours he was allowed, but Jim was basically reactive and not proactive. And I'm not saying is if we started this tomorrow with a full-time person, that they would be able to be proactive right away, because I think there's a lot of catching up to do. But that's, I've been an opponent of that, of making this a full-time job for the last 4 years. So I think it's time that we do it. So.
Okay, so just to be clear, of course, you know that it's not a budgeted item, and you're going to be voting on something that will come to you later, that Shelley's going to need dollars transferred over onto this. So at this time, I'll look for a motion in a second. I've got that, I'm sorry, I'm just looking for council action. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Thanks, Kenny. Number 12, consideration of change order number 1 to the contract with Gray Construction for the storm shelter project, decreasing the contract amount $26,623. This time I'll look for a motion and a second for discussion. We'll turn it over to Shane.
So moved.
Motion by Mike. Second by Glenn. Shane, you go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. As you recall, we awarded the contract to Gray Construction at the May 15 meeting. The amount of their bid was $246,800, which was 10% higher than our engineer's estimate, which was $224,528. When we brought that to you for award, we explained that we were going to reach out and work on a change order that would reduce the amount of the contract. Through our architect, we were able to do that, and the result is a reduction change order in the amount of $26,623. What does that do to our overall project? It brings the project cost down to $220,177. With the FEMA grant that the fire department was able to obtain, that reduces the cost to the city to $51,781, which is exactly about where we wanted to be. So with that, I would recommend that we approve this change order and build a building to it's a more basic style, but we'll still get a building done for exactly where we thought we would be.
Any questions for Shane on this? None? Okay, hearing none, I'll look for council action. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Number 13, consideration of bids received for the skate park project. I'm going to look for a motion and a second for discussion purposes. Motion by Bruce, second by Brad. Shane, if you'll take this again.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. This is our second bid for this project. The first bid, you recall, we got a bid of $275,000 from Evergreen Skate Parks out of Stevensville, Montana. That exceeded our expectations by a considerable amount. So at that time, we chose to rebid the project. We did change the project scope to include city staff doing certain items, such as removal of the existing asphalt surfacing, providing the required fill material, which is estimated at 1,000 yards, providing topsoil material, and finishing the landscaping and seeding for the project. With that reduction and the rebid, the new bid came in again. Was the low bidder was the skate park, or Evergreen Skate Parks, and their bid was $225,000. It's still a little bit higher than we'd like to see. Our adjusted estimate was $220,000, so we're really in the ballpark there. That, and then there's ongoing fundraising, so we don't know exactly where we're at. We're looking at, without all of the fundraising completed, our budgeting process would fall about $25,000 short of the bid. So if approval is sought here, the council would be committing to the full $225,000. Once the fundraising is completed, we would know what the final dollar amount possibly would be as a commitment to the city above what we have budgeted. Now, that may be zero. If they fundraise enough, we may cover the full $25,000.
Shane, how much that in-kind that we're now contributing, that costs us something, obviously. I mean, do we have any kind of dollar amount as to what the materials, labor, time, et cetera, is going to cost us?
Yeah, it's hard for me to equate our man hours to that because, you know, I don't know what we charge for equipment. I don't know what everybody gets paid per hour. So what I did is I looked at it from if we had to buy the stuff, what we think that would cost us. And in my memo, I said estimated cost was $20,000 for the asphalt removal, $15,000 for the fill, and $3,000 for topsoil and $2,000 for landscaping. I think those numbers are a little bit high, especially considering we already own the materials, like the 1,000 yards of fill. We have that dirt. We just need to haul it to the site. So that's a fairly conservative estimate of about $40,000, and it's actually not going to cost us the $40,000 because again we own the material and it's just a matter of hauling it and placing it. So I think we've done the best that we can in trying to get this project within reach.
Have we seen the final plans on this?
Yes.
When did we do that? I mean, with detail or?
Well, yeah, we have a set of plans. We've had that for quite some time.
Seen in detail also numerous times.
I think we started talking about this in February, if I remember.
Right. I'm reluctant to count on, because we have to count on them not raising the funds is really what we have to count on if we approve this. And how has this project grown in its overall end product from what it was first envisioned at? Has it grown, or is it?
I can speak to that, Shane. The project, literally from the very, very beginning, it has grown, and what has grown is the bowl. There was not a bowl put in the original set of plans, and the skaters, including Brad Carter, literally said we have to have a bowl. If you're going to have a skate park, you got to have a bowl. That's where the additional costs came in and moved this project higher. That's why they've been out. They've been doing fundraisers. They've been doing pancake feeds. They're doing just about everything they can, and coming up $1,000 at a time and getting it. And they're doing quite a great job, I think.
Are these numbers, they include what they've raised so far?
Yes.
Yep.
What they've raised so far, we've got right around 200,000, maybe a little bit more than that, if they got their final total at the bank. But we're real close to 200,000 or exceeding it. Most likely exceeding it now because this information is a couple weeks old. I guess I'll summarize this. I'm not going to make a recommendation either way. You guys can do what you like with the project. There's two things. We don't do escape projects. So when we went into the project originally, we probably didn't know what a realistic budget might be for a facility this size. So I don't want to squash the numbers too much because we might have the biggest bargain we can possibly get for a skate park. But I can't concrete verify that. But we've done our best effort with what plans were provided to the city council, and we vetted that out to all the skate park designers and builders around the area, and this is our best effort, and we're $25,000 short. I think if you really want to build a new skate park and vacate the old one, this may be your best opportunity. I don't know that these projects ever get cheaper. They always seem to get more expensive the longer you wait.
Shane, the existing skate park will need to go away. Is that a correct statement?
Yes, that's the intention. The school would like to reutilize that property.
Do we have a time frame on that?
There is not a set time frame at this time.
In speaking with one of the major fundraisers today, they're aware that there's about a $25,000 shortfall, and they're very hopeful that is going to be able to be made up by efforts that they are doing and they're in. Now, I can't commit anybody to that, but they're very hopeful that they're aware of the shortfall and they feel it will be met.
Okay, any other questions?
The fundraising they're doing, is there a specific organization or is it just individuals out on their own? Or?
Yeah, it's just the skate park kids that are out there doing this, and And they're holding all kinds of things every week.
Just to give them a plug, their most recent fundraising thing is a raffle. It's a pretty good price regiment that they have. It includes large screen TVs and various other things that would be well worth winning. And that I don't know what the date of the raffle is. It's coming up in the next couple weeks, but their goal was to sell, up to upwards of 2,000 tickets at, I don't know, $10-20 a piece. I think they're $10 a piece for individual and 3 tickets for $20. But so if they are successful at selling tickets, they could really fill a lot of this shortfall pretty quickly.
Shane, what's the target date? What are we looking at time frame wise to start this project?
Well,
the construction.
I would have until we make award, I don't really have a time frame, because they'll put us in their schedule however we fit in. But presumably now it would be a July, August start date and probably a completion date in early fall. But
And is this, did we mention last time there's no lighting on this, right? As far as like for nighttime?
Not at this time. That could probably be something we'd consider adding at a future date.
Okay. Is there a fencing around this?
No.
So it's an open unit. Is our current one fenced in?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So is that an issue at all?
Liability-wise? I think it's kind of a detriment that it's fenced in. Sisseton has a nice park. Brookings has a nice park. None of those are fenced in, and it's just much easier for the kids to access, because I know, like Ryan, you guys are called all the time, can you open it up? Can you do this and do that? And I think it just makes a lot of sense to have it open so everybody could use it at any time. I think you're going to see that a lot of the kids on bikes are also going to be in here. There's those pedalist bicycles that they use. I forget the name of them, but
BMX?
I don't know what they call them. But they don't have pedals on them. They just kind of use gravity.
Right.
And so,
yeah.
But we have no liability risk with this facility. Is
No.
that correct?
No, there will be signs put up that, skate at your own risk. So stay off.
Well, I'm not going out there. I'll get her watching.
Okay, if there's no other questions, I'm going to ask for council action. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Mayor, I do have a question before I answer that.
Okay.
Don't we have to state where the additional funds are going to come from?
Do you want that stated right now, Shell, or do you want to?
I mean, we shouldn't be approving something without knowing where those funds come from.
Anytime it's in Fund 212, so anytime you don't specifically state, it's an assumption that any overage is going to come from the unallocated fund balance in that fund.
If there is one.
Yes, which there is. So that's where that excess of up to 25,000 will come from.
Okay, so my vote is yes on that.
Okay. Motion passed. Thank you. Okay, number 14, consideration of bids received for the wastewater laboratory replacement project. And I will again ask for a motion and a second for discussion, and then we'll turn it over to Shane. Motion by Randy. Second by Mike. Shane, you're up again.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a project out at the wastewater treatment facilities to replace the laboratory, and that sounds like kind of an odd term, but basically they're stripping all the cabinets out of it, all of the upgrading lighting. They're even, I think, talking about replacing the ceiling tiles. I mean, it's pretty much stripping out the laboratory and bringing it back up to code. It's old. It's been well used and in need of some work. So with that, we hired HR Green Incorporated to design it and provide us plans and help us with the bidding. We received bids on May 23rd. There were 4 bids received. Engineer's estimate was $163,000. The low bid was in the amount of $161,069 from PKG Contracting Incorporated of Fargo, North Dakota. That contractor happens to also be the current contractor for the digester rehabilitation project. So we feel that it's going to be very beneficial to the city if we award that we have the same contractor on 2 different projects, and probably will get a wonderful response in completing the project. With that, Howard R. Green wrote a letter of recommendation, and city staff and wastewater staff concurs with that recommendation to award.
Any questions for Shane on this? Hearing none, I'll ask for council action. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Number 15, under old business, I did want to touch base on, Rob wasn't able to be here tonight, but he is currently working out at the mall on that little, what is that, old west trail that goes in front of it. He's been removing the soft pack that they put in this through the winter months, and they're actually putting in a hot pack. So they'll be going over the top of that on Friday with the new 1.5-inch layer of asphalt over that mall, kind of that front entrance way that we raised the dollars for. That is not going to cost the city any dollars, although Rob's work out there is a small expense that they're doing getting rid of this soft pack and getting it ready to go for them.
For clarification, I did get an offer of a deduct of $4 per ton of asphalt for I'll call it an experimental thing, but we've been in some discussions with Dunnick Brothers about allowing RAP, which is recycled asphalt products, into a mix, and they have offered a $4 deduct for this overlay in the mall, and they've also offered it for the Jackson Park parking lot project if we decide to go forward with it, and the trail that's associated with the Jackson Park. So with that, I mean, that's I think a $2,700 deduct on the mall too, so we're kind of bringing the cost down on that. And not that you need that, I'm not going to ask for action tonight, but I mean, if the council would like to give me direction on negotiating the Jackson Park and the bike trail separately later on, that would be appreciated. But that's where I'm at, and these are nice experimental projects because they're not big, but yet they're big enough to probably see some performance issues and see how that works. So just some food for thought.
So they,
on that note, how does that get evaluated and over what period of time? To know that at some point in time, obviously, it would be our consideration to utilize this product within the city. How does it get evaluated, and
so
over what time frame does it get evaluated?
So part of it is initial right away. You want to look at how the consistency of the mix is when it goes down, when it's hot, when it's pliable. You want to make sure that it looks like asphalt pavement that you would want without any divots, any holes, the texture and that kind of stuff. And then kind of monitor how the densities are achieved when they roll it. That's two things. And then really we just kind of we do have to watch and monitor performance at some point, which does take more than a year or two. I mean, but if we liked how the consistency of it went out, then what we would probably do is propose a project next year that was a little bit larger and try it on a strip of roadway, so to speak, and then go from there. But I will tell you that all state governments in this region, South Dakota, Iowa, Minnesota, allow RAP in their roadways. There are many communities that allow RAP in their roadways, and I think that we're behind the times if we don't at least start considering it and moving forward. So
is that done from millings, or is that done from?
It can be done primarily. It's done from milled asphalt. It can include other asphalt products like shingles and stuff, but in this region, that's not very prominent. It's 90% milled asphalt.
Or if we tore apart a whole section of asphalt road and hauled it out there, they could grind it up and reuse that, or
correct.
Yeah. So it would be all original asphalt product.
Well, yeah, it'd be from original asphalt pavement projects. Yeah.
Mayor, I've got a quick update. You may recall I think it was the second April meeting, we contracted with Ryan Query from GPS Great Plains Sponsorship to look at the Wellness Center as far as what sort of revenue-raising opportunities we may have out there. He's been gathering information, working with a number of staff here within Watertown, and we are having a meeting. Some of you are going to be attending that tomorrow for his preliminary presentation of his work to date. So just a quick update as far as where we are on that.
Very good. I also, Brenda, if you want to come up, under new business, we had this discussion in our work session about the building that they want to go out by our field house. The county does. Do you recall that? The storage building. We don't really have anything in stone yet. We don't have a lease agreement that's put in place. We have the lease agreement, which basically just got done for us today. Between Justin and the district attorney.
State's Attorney Patrick McCann.
State's Attorney, I'm sorry. They got the lease agreement done. We couldn't get it on the agenda because of time element. But what the county is looking for, you guys, is the confidence level that they can start working on it. Their county people are going to be doing a lot of the earth work, the dirt work around the area. They need to get started only because they're going to be chip sealing, I believe is what you said.
Correct. Next week, they will start chip sealing, and that will tie them up for approximately 6 weeks, weather permitting.
So they're asking you guys for kind of an okay to get started on it even before that $1 lease agreement is signed. So I guess I'm just kind of, I mean, can you talk to Brenda and say, yeah, I'm okay with that, or no, I don't think we should, or
Are we still on
you guys
the
want?
east side? Was that the final where they asked for? Is that where we're at?
Yes.
Yeah, the lease agreement reads currently where that southeast corner of the rec center property there is, and it's a north-south orientation for the building. So if that gives you an idea. The way that the lease reads right now is indemnification comprehensive for the city from the county. The city would then indemnify the county for ingress and egress, which we control the means of effectively by having the parking lot, owning the parking lot and the entrances to the parking lot immediately to the north. One of the requirements of the county's performance is that screening be provided with the intention of obstructing the view of the residential properties to the east of the metal pole barn that they plan on putting up there.
And the folks that are to the east have been contacted, and they're perfectly fine with it.
The term of the lease would then extend to November 6th, 2035, which also corresponds to the date at which the lease for the ice arena, which the county owns the ground for, is leased it out for the city building. That's when that lease would expire. So they would both expire at the same time.
It's going to be a pretty basic lease, isn't it?
Yes.
I mean, it's going to be, we're going to get our dollar, aren't we? All right.
Can we get that in cash, Brenda?
Just checking. You never know. I mean, if it's basic language, I would have no reason to not proceed with it. To me, it's a formality at that point.
The only item that required a little bit, I mean, it was the legal description for the property itself because it was a subdivision with a lot of tiny lots. And at the same time, we had to provide an easement for ingress and egress for the county to get to the building. So that also required a sophisticated legal description. But we had our brain trust here on second floor and with the county come up with what we view as a very accurate legal description. So, no, I'm very confident in that.
I don't have any problem with going forward.
I'm fine with it.
I think, Brenda, it sounds like the one question that came up was the neighbors, and it sounds like you've rectified or clarified that with them. So if they're okay.
Yep,
Yeah.
we have that included in the lease that we
Yeah,
will put
good.
trees there for screening.
Good.
I'm okay with it, Brenda.
Okay, well, thanks, Brenda. I think you kind of got the go-ahead to get moving forward on it, and we'll get the lease done.
That's
we'll make it official here at the next council meeting. All right, any liaison member reports?
I do have one. everybody probably got this, well, they should have gotten with their utility stuff for here recently. I just want to, and what it is, it's the water quality report. As you know, every year the EPA takes a look at water here in Watertown. And the only reason I bring it to your attention now is that a year ago there were some issues with something called trihalomethane, THM, whatever it is, that they were put on notice that needed to be rectified. Well, that has been taken care of. It was an anomaly based upon where the sample was taken, and essentially what it amounts to is we got a clean bill of health as far as our water quality here in Watertown with their latest, audit of our water here in Watertown.
Sounds good. Thanks, Glenn. Any need to go into executive session? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion in a second to adjourn this meeting. All right, I have Mike and Don. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. We're adjourned. Thank you.